Welcome to Check Out My Dad Pod, a podcast by a dad, with dads, and for dads. My name is Mike Wickett, and in the span of a year, I went from a father of 0 to a father of 3. So after 20 years on the radio, I hung up my headphones to stay at home with my kids. And I'm here on this podcast to talk about it with you. And inside the Koss Headphone Studios, this is Check Out My Dad Pod. Thanks for joining us here on another episode of Check Out My Dad Pod. Glad to have you. And my guest dad this week, you hear him as one of the leading conservative voices in all of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 9 to 11, Monday through Friday on News Radio 1130 WISN. Dan O'Donnell is with us. Dan, thank you so much for the time, my friend. How are you? Now, let me ask you this. You and I have been conversing here for 19 seconds. Is this the most civil and longest conversation you've had with a Democrat in 2 weeks, 4 years? Like, where are we at here? Where does this rank?
Well, Democrats I don't know personally. Yes. No, a lot of my family, I'm from an old Irish Democrat family. In fact, my great uncle was a Democrat county executive back in the 1970s and 80s. So there's a lot of the Irish Democrat tradition in my family. But yeah,
what happened to you?
Well, it's all the Democrats from the 70s and 80s, especially in Milwaukee County. They're Republicans now. It's just sort of the natural progression of politics, the Catholic influence and that sort of stuff. But yeah, the last 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 4
years, 8 before that, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Now, a friend of mine who listened to me when I was on in Milwaukee, and I assume listens to you, and he definitely aligns more with you than me politically. He suggested that I have you on. I thought, you know what? This is, first of all, I know you're going to be a fun interview to talk to because radio guys always are. And you're a smart guy, and you're a lawyer, and I know that this is going to be a lot of fun. But I feel like you and we should be praised for our symbolism here, that the right and the left can come together and not have to fight about politics, but talk about a common thing here, and that's fatherhood, as this podcast is generally called a celebration of fatherhood.
Well, as it should be, because, it's amazing, Mike. You're a sports guy. So what politics has sort of become is an extension of the sort of tribalism that you have in sports. Like, I'm a Packers fan, Brewers fan, and actually my best friend, my entire life, I've been best buddies with him since kindergarten, really. And it's funny because his last name is Seitz, and I call him Seitz. And every time I say Seitz, my buddy Seitz, everybody thinks I'm talking about Charlie Sykes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, not Charlie Sykes, Brandon Seitz. Okay. So he's always been a Bears fan, and we've always had, good-natured ribbing about the Packers and Bears and stuff like that. But there are some people who kind of take that fandom to an excessive amount, which I'm sure you're used to doing sports talk. And it's the same thing that sort of developed in politics, that it's sort of like an extension of your identity. And when you say, well, no, I disagree with this thing that Democrats are doing, it's sort of seen as like a personal affront, when really, when you do it professionally, like you do with sports talk, it's sort of like, yeah, no, it's not personal. It's just politics. It's like The Godfather. It's not personal. It's business. That's why, how like in Wisconsin, we're constantly talking about how Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are biased against the Packers, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And nothing ticks me off more than that, because it's like they could not possibly care less. Do you know who they're rooting for? Joe Buck and Troy Aikman to have a good broadcast, right?
My favorite
you
thing,
and I know
Joe Buck's
professionally.
Joe Buck's old Twitter bio used to just say, "I hate your team."
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing in politics, but like when people get past that, they recognize that still, whether it is sports or whether it is the arts or entertainment or whatever, or fatherhood or, raising our kids, we all still do have like way more in common than we have that divides us.
Absolutely. And you know what, I there is something about, being a dad and the whole sports and politics and tying it all together, because I want my son to be a football fan, but I'm not going to push him to be a football fan. It's hard for me because I'm going through this for the first time, and we'll talk about you and what it was like for you 13 years ago, almost 14 years ago.
Don't make me feel old, dude.
And where you're at right now, because it's like, I don't know I got 2 girls and a boy, and they're all under 2. I don't know what life's going to be like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. And that's where I kind of want to start with you as, if you can go back and you have 3 kids, the oldest is 13. If
Yeah.
you can go back before he was born, what was life like for Dan O'Donnell?
A lot quieter.
Yes.
there was a lot less yelling, a lot less fighting over toys. Honestly, my wife and I, we've been together for, oh my goodness, today's the 18th. Oh my God. This is kind of amazing. We have been together literally 20 years today.
Is today your wedding anniversary?
No, our wedding anniversary is September 5th.
Okay.
But we started dating. I think it was our first kiss was, oh my God, November 18th, 2000. Holy cow. That, Mike, thank you, because I would have totally forgotten about that. And she did too, because I was just home and we were, just talking about random stuff and what we're doing for dinner tonight and that sort of thing. Holy cow. So we were together November 18th, 2000. We've been together ever since. So literally 20 years ago today, we started dating. Oh my God.
So when this thing goes, when we're done here, I'll do the editing and I've got more to talk about because I had a big moment in my kid's life today I want to talk about. You can play her the podcast and then you can be on. You can be like, honey, did you forget something? And she can be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you can win one, Dan.
I think I'm going to. Holy God. I'm so glad I did this because, since the election, it's been so crazy. I've been working nonstop before the election, obviously, too, but with everything that's been going on afterwards. And the days have this tendency to sort of run together, and I'm never quite sure what date it is. So thank you. I can't tell you how much I appreciate doing this today because of, but to answer your question, what was life like? It was the two of us. We were, we traveled some. I had just finished law school when Nick was born in September of 2007. And I had gotten out of law school and realized, I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I think I had recognized that midway through, and broadcasting was really, my passion. And I was fortunate enough to have a job waiting for me. And almost immediately after, I started doing Brewers post game and doing a weekly Brewer show in addition to doing news and hosting other sports talk and just general interest talk type programs there. And, I worked a lot, and Megan and I just sort of hung out. We were a typical mid-20s couple.
In Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I mean, man.
It was fun.
There was a lot of beer consumed and late nights and going to Brewers games and Packers games and, concerts and all that. I remember those days. I do. I remember those fondly.
Hard to believe that was 13 years ago before kids. My goodness.
Did you always want to be a dad, or is this something that you and Megan sort of stumbled into?
Well, we quite literally stumbled into it the first time around. But we had been together for 7 years before Nick was born. And we, the cart kind of got before the horse a little bit because we were married 2 years later and have been happily married ever since. But yeah, I always knew I have a brother who's 11 years younger than me. And our parents divorced when he was about 4. And I saw the next door neighbor. She left for college, and her little sister was about 4 or 5 years old and was just devastated when she did. And that, I think, always kind of stuck with me. I think that's a big reason I went to Marquette as opposed to Madison. I mean, the scholarship money didn't hurt, but that was a big reason I stayed close to home. And instead of going to Boston or Los Angeles for law school, which I was originally kind of planning on doing, and, Megan, I think my wife, would have gone with me, but I coached his soccer and basketball teams and was just always there as he grew up and kind of needed more of a father figure. So, yeah, I mean, I always envisioned myself being a dad and, coaching the kids in sports and playing with them and doing all that. And lo and behold, 13 years later, it's exactly what I'm doing. This year aside, of course, because basketball just got canceled. So
what kind of coach was Dan O'Donnell back in the day? Was he a hothead? Were you chilling on the sidelines?
Oh God, no. Anybody will tell you, especially in soccer, which is probably the one sport I'm qualified to coach because I played it in high school. Basketball, I was an all-universe towel waver. on the bench. And tennis, I played tennis my entire life, so I did that. But there's not a lot of coaching. You just kind of hit with the kids. Soccer, I'm in. I don't yell at the kids or get mad at them, but I'll be like yelling direction, like, no, fall back. Okay, step forward. We got to get the offsides trap. We got to get all this going.
And they're 9 years old, and you're yelling all this stuff.
Yeah, I'm definitely the character. What was it, Will Ferrell in that movie, Kicking and Screaming?
Yes.
No, I'm not like crazy yelling at the kids, but we have fun. And with my older son, I've had the same kids for 4 or 5 years now. So you get to know them, and they know that Coach Dan is going to be pacing the sidelines and all that. Basically, it's exactly how I am on the radio, is how you would expect me to be on the sidelines. But no, it's fun. I just, there is, as you get older, and I hope you coach your daughters as well as your son. I'm nervous because my youngest daughter is 6. And she's just starting out in sports and that stuff. And she hasn't done any team sports yet. And I'm going to coach her too. But it's the most fun, rewarding thing I think you can do, whether or not you're a head coach or an assistant coach. You just get out there with the kids and just play. I mean, it literally is like recess every day after school. And it's just, the kids love it. I love it. It's just so much fun.
I remember that. That's one of the great memories. And for whatever reason, I don't remember a ton of my childhood. And my wife thinks that I've blocked something out major, which I haven't, to my knowledge. But one of the things I remember most was when my dad coached me in Little League. Now, he didn't always coach me in Little League because my dad was a good Little League coach. And I was young, so he would coach kids much older until I got to be that age. But that's one of the things I remember, especially when I was no good, but especially when I sucked at Little League. He was still there to put his arm around me. Like, that is one of the things that I definitely remember and wanting to do when my kids got older. Now, who knows if they're even going to want to play Little League, 6 years from now, because they're all under 2 right now. Like I said, they're all still in diapers.
And you know what? I don't want to say you can kind of push them towards that.
But you can push them.
But you can. Because, for example, my wife started playing violin when she was 2 years old. And in fact, her first violin lesson there's a great picture of her. She's holding her violin, looking very angry, wearing a swimsuit, because somehow she got it in her head that she was taking swimming lessons. No, you're taking violin lessons. So starting from the time all my kids were very young, we started doing violin. And it's not like play the violin when you feel like it. It's called the Suzuki method of violin, or piano you can do, or cello, or pretty much any instrument. But the idea is you fully immerse yourself in the instrument, right? And it's almost like a lifestyle. So the kids, the older ones, have been practicing. They've practiced every day for 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days.
Wow.
If today's the 18th. Yep. It was September 16th. So 2 days. So they played every day, and they do lessons once a week, group lessons once a week. Before the pandemic, concerts and stuff all the time. And it's very intense. So you'd be shocked at what even like 6-year-olds can do with the violin. So they didn't have a choice in that one. My wife said, no, we're going to give the gift of music to the kids. And sure enough, they do every night. They do probably, I would say, a half hour, 45 minutes each of violin. And now my oldest son, he's into the guitar now, and my daughter wants to play piano. And so there's things that you can kind of like force them to do. And we started the same thing with sports. So they do soccer. The oldest one is kind of gravitating away from basketball. I mean, I'm 5'10" and a half. So, and my wife's like 5'2". So do the math on basketball. But like they do soccer, baseball, tennis, golf, basketball, like all the sports, just so they kind of get immersed in it and like have this background of doing that. And that's I have a friend also who his son is 11 and he's never done a team sport. He's never done anything like that because they really didn't push him. And we're sort of like, man, you kind of got to, you know what I'm saying? Like you kind of have to, because they're like, oh, well, he says he doesn't want to because he's really shy. Well, that's part of how you get over your shyness, So it's that fine balance between if a kid really isn't into it, saying, okay, that's fine. but really allowing them, I think, to have that full range of experience, like early in life, so they can later on decide what they want to continue with.
Over the last 2 years, 2 months, and 5 days, have any of them come to you and said, "We hate this. I want to stop"?
Oh God.
And you don't
Not
let
that,
them.
no, now it's just part of their life. But every night, oh my gosh, the crying that I want to do this for practice. I don't want to do this. It's, oh yeah, all constantly. I mean, constantly. Like, in fact, I was talking on the air. This had to have been a year ago. And a guy was saying, okay, we get it. Your kids are all perfect and they play violin. And I said, no, you don't see the screeching, the youngest one hitting her mom, like just the oldest one storming off when, she corrects something in his play. I mean, it's like, it is a battle every
great.
night. I give
can't
all
wait
the
to have
credit to her.
teenagers, Dan. I can't wait, man. It sounds
Oh
wonderful.
God. And he's easy. I mean, he's 13 and he's about as easy as it gets. He's, slightly moody, but it's like he hasn't really gotten into girls, at least that we know of, and social media and all that stuff yet.
Yeah.
But it's tough. Yeah, yet, which I assume it's coming in the next year. We're at the discussion phase of whether or not he deserves a phone. Just because, he's got his iPad and he's got all this stuff, but it's like he's at the age where he can go bike to the Quick Trip with his friends, and we want to be able to know where he is. So we're like debating, okay, Christmas this year, does he get a phone? And, so you got that to look forward to, Mike.
Hey, listen, 13 years ago, phones weren't a thing. What's going to be cool 10 years from now? Because there was no Facebook when you got out of school. There was no Facebook. What's going to be when my kids become teenagers and your youngest becomes a teenager? Like, I don't know. Is there going to be an Instagram, a TikTok? Is an iPhone going to be a thing anymore? Like, what's next technology-wise that's going to scare the living crap out of all of us?
It's going to be a microchip.
Yeah.
Where you remember the movie Minority Report?
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that's the future, where it's just stuff is beamed, like you can see augmented reality just in your eye.
Great. Sounds wonderful.
That's sort of a hobby of mine, like trying to predict the future. And near as I can tell, Minority Report is probably the closest that we've come. Like with the self-driving cars that you can still drive. I mean, that's a reality. Who would have thought even 5 years ago, Mike, that self-driving cars, it would just sort of be like, yeah, that's a thing now.
Yeah, you can get an Uber with no driver, and
yeah.
And I talked about that when I was on in Kansas City, when this was becoming more of a thing, up until last year when I was on the air down there. And I'm like, no, I want a driver. And I'm like, well, a driver looks down at the cheeseburger. A driver looks down at the radio. And I mean, a computer. And I don't know what the right answer is to driverless cars.
Well, it's tough because the one thing the computers can't catch up to quick enough is human error in other drivers. So when you're seeing the driverless cars get into accidents, it's because another guy they crashed into is looking down at his cheeseburger.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just impossible to predict human behavior. So like the thinking is either everybody's going to have a driverless car, or it's probably not going to be feasible that cars are totally driverless because of the liability.
Would you get in a driverless car right now?
Yeah, I think so.
Would you get in a driverless car to take you to Chicago from Milwaukee?
Yeah, now that's
you could go to a pick and save, but there's a difference between doing that and going to Chicago.
Freeway driving, I think, would be easier than city driving because there's less like stop and start.
Yeah.
Although in Chicago, freeway driving is just as stop and start as city driving.
All it is when you get on the Dan Ryan.
I think I would.
Hey, so you have your first boy 13 years ago, Nick. What was it like on delivery day for you when, for the first time, you're holding your son?
Oh man. He came very quickly. And like so quickly, I will never forget this. We're driving to the hospital and my wife was saying, okay, I'm having contractions. And we thought, okay, well, I can take a shower and all this. And we're driving to the hospital. And I'll never forget this because we were passing Miller Park and we're driving to West Dallas. and the song Ordinary Day comes on by Vanessa Carlton. The ironic thing is that, of course, this was not an ordinary day, and we're having, just a boy, just an ordinary boy. And she says her contractions were coming, and she was having contractions during the song. And I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to childbirth class, but I knew that's really close together, and oh crap, we'd better step on it.
Yeah.
He was born, I want to say 45 minutes after we got to the hospital.
Wow.
So it was like there was no time in between. And it was amazing. Like the doctors had to work on my wife for a while. So it was just him and me. And I'm taking all these pictures and I'm calling everybody in the family. And I didn't actually hold him or kiss him until my wife was able to, because I wanted her to be the first one to hold him. And they like put him right next to her chest right away. And then shuttled him and I away to the scale, and they weighed him and did all this. So I got all the pictures and stuff. So it wasn't really until then that they finally were done with Megan and they handed him to her, where it really was like, oh my gosh, we've got a little baby. And then of course it was great, because when they finally were ready to wheel us back into the room, the actual room from the childbirth room, my mom and her parents were there waiting. And I came up and was like saying, okay, trying to describe the baby. And then they wheeled mom and baby up, and you could just see the parents were like looking past me, like trying to get a glimpse. And it's amazing. I remember every detail. And even so many years ago, it was amazing. It was just indescribable.
What was your first poopy diaper like?
Oh God. Well, it was what is it called? Meconium.
Yeah.
So it was this like sticky tar-like substance. And we're like, oh my God, is this what it's like all the time? Because it was just like tar. I mean, it was like the La Brea tar pits in this kid's little diaper. And we're like, oh my God, is this what it's like all the time? And we couldn't, the one I remember more than the poopy diaper was passing him to Megan for the first time. Like she's trying, and someone captured it. And it's like, I'm trying to hold the baby, and and she's like, oh, don't drop it. It was, so that's the one I remember more than the diapers, but it was definitely a new experience.
You're not getting that on WISN. I can tell you that right now. So you take the baby home, and I assume you were off. I know she was probably off. What were those first couple of months like for you? Did you get any sleep, or were you like most parents? And the answer is no.
I actually went back to work. She was not working at the time. She was still getting her master's. And I went back to work within, I'd say, about a week.
Oh, wow.
Or so. Like I didn't take any time off. Like I did not take paternity really for any of the kids, just because, I mean, it's unpaid. And, I was the one making money for us. So he slept, our oldest, actually all three of them slept pretty easily through the night. We paid for it. Our oldest had major surgery at 1 month old. He had what's known as pyloric. He had pyloric stenosis, which is really common. In fact, if you look carefully at Will Ferrell, his stomach, he's shirtless a lot, right? You'll see a little scar, and that's from the pyloric stenosis surgery. What happens is the pyloric muscle is the muscle that squeezes food from your stomach to your intestines. His was born totally shut, so they just have to slice it. But it turns out the food can't get through, and he would forcefully vomit. And, the doctors were stumped. He wasn't gaining weight and all this. You have the surgery. He's like a totally new kid, and he was fine. But before, it was terrifying. We were really, really scared. So we like to say, with all of that terror, especially since about 15 minutes into the surgery, 3-4 week old baby, they say, well, the parents of Nick, they get on the loudspeaker and they say, would the parents of Nicholas O'Donnell report to, and it's this tiny little room. Oh, and it's this dimly lit room, and all that's on the table is a box of Kleenexes. and we're like, oh my God, what are they going to tell us? I'm thinking, like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, he had a bad reaction to the anesthesia. I'm just like bracing for the worst. The doctor says, well, we know the stenosis is there, but we didn't see it on the x-ray. We just need your consent to do the operation anyway. I'm like, yes, do it. The baby is alive though, right?
You need a better PR firm handling that kind of situation.
Yeah,
the room should be painted
like,
pink and lightly lit or brightly lit.
I was like, yes, please. So we said we paid for the years of good sleep in that moment, which probably added or took away like 15 years from both our lives just with the stress. So yeah, all our kids, if I remember right, were decent sleepers. I mean, they would wake up and like want to feed or whatever, but they were all pretty good. They slept through the night pretty early.
How quickly did you guys decide, all right, that was fun, and especially with her and her body, and I don't know if you were trying again. We did not try the second time, and poof, we got twins.
Really?
Oh, yeah. We needed science's help the first. We did it backwards. We needed science's help the first time, and that's usually when you see twins or, God forbid, triplets. And then the second time, no science was needed, and hello, twins. That was...
That's natural twins are really rare nowadays.
Yep.
That's wow. We were right away after we got married. We got married in September of 2009, and Chris was born in August of 2010. So we decided right away we wanted to have another kid. And then afterwards, it was about 3-4 years after Chris, we decided, okay, we're ready again. And we got our girl. So
did she always want the girl? And you can admit that you may have also wanted a girl, because I understand. Look, I love my daughters, but there's something different about a dad holding his son.
It is, we did always want a daughter. In fact, we knew what her name was going to be even before our oldest son was born, Gracie. It's a song by Ben Folds, which it's all about his daughter and what it's like being a dad. And we just always thought that was like the most beautiful song about parenthood. So we said, if we ever have a girl, her name is going to be Gracie. And it took, 7 years or so, but we got her and we got our girl. And then, we decided, okay, 3's probably enough here.
Who had the surgery, you or her, after you were done? You said there's no room left in the inn.
I did.
You did. Yeah, we both did.
It was so much easier. It's, I mean, no shame in it. We just said, we're done. Our family's complete, and that's it.
They had to go in after the twins, and when they were in there, they tied Lee up. And
really?
Yeah, we actually had to choose. One hospital here in Des Moines didn't allow for that procedure to happen because one was a Catholic hospital and didn't do that kind of thing. So we chose the Methodist hospital that did tie because we were done. And then a month ago, I had mine. So because we figured like if we could get twins within 6 weeks of the first baby being born, there's some higher power. We're just going to try to lessen our statistical chances of pulling this off again. So, hey, you got 3 out of it. What have the last 6 years been like? You mentioned you mentioned the violin, and I know you're doing well at ISN, but what's it been like raising 3 kids? Because I'm taking notes.
It's been fantastic. It's hard when you've got a baby and you obviously have 3. It was, I think, easier because we would split the work a little bit. Like I would take the boys when the daughter was a baby. And, obviously there's not a whole lot I can do in terms of feeding. But once we got out of the baby stage, it became so much easier. And now obviously the problems, are with friends or school and grades, whatever. But it's just much more manageable. Like we can put the oldest in charge of the other 2 and go out for dinner, for example. It'll come.
Dan, I know you're going to be playing golf soon, which is because it's weirdly warm in Wisconsin right now. But I don't know if I think I'm going to play golf in the year 2024, 2025 maybe.
That's what, when I started my career at WTMJ, and before my oldest was born, one of the things I did for them was review movies. So I would do written movie reviews and on-air movie reviews. And that was just when I would go to movies
I
back when
love
they
the
did
movies. I
screening.
go by myself because it was my thing. My
Yeah.
wife doesn't like them, so I go alone.
Yeah, exactly. And we would go to screenings. And my brother and I've got another brother who's almost the same age, as 16 months younger, and my buddy, and they would always laugh because we're like, we're making out like bandits. We don't have to do any work. And like each screening, you would get 1 or 2 guest passes, or, I knew all the screening reps. So I would just we would just go, and there'd be like 3 of us, 4 of us. And this was at the advent of when they were doing like the brew house type movie theaters.
Oh, yeah.
Bars. We'd go and have a couple drinks, have a steak dinner afterwards, talk about the movie. And I have not seen, that's one thing. Outside of like Disney Pixar movies,
Oh, God.
I just have not seen like any of them. I think the one Marvel movie I saw was Iron Man, and we saw Black Panther on a plane. But like now the kids are getting old enough where they're into that. But like, we just don't see movies anymore.
There's a block of time now where I will not go to the movies until the kids are in elementary school. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah.
And even those will still be Cars 4 and Frozen 5?
Probably, yeah. Like when they're about 3 or 4 is when I think you can start taking them to movies to see like the kids' movie. Fortunately, like Pixar, they're just excellent movies. Like they're phenomenal. Yeah. Like Coco,
it's great
to me. It's
Coco's great.
Brilliant.
Plus, for some reason, my son, if you put on mariachi music, my son chills out. I don't know why. Like we'll play the Pandora channel, or we'll put on Coco, and he could be crying, and it's like on a pivot to the screen, and he just stops.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, like, Coco, Up. The boys are really into Star Wars, and my daughter's obviously really into Frozen and Barbie and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there is a block of time where it's just like your life is just your kids, and that's just, by necessity. And eventually they grow up, and you sort of get you get to reclaim your life, and then there's a period of a few decades, and then you have grandkids. Then you're right back to square one.
What's been the best part of the last 13 years?
Oh man, that's tough. I hate to like sound wishy-washy, but everything really. I mean, what do they say? The days are long, but the years are short.
I keep hearing that, but my weeks are long. My months have been very long. I've been quarantining before COVID even hit. I've been doing it before it was cool with all 3 of these things, Dan.
Just everything. I mean, just, we would say, I wish the kids would stay at this age forever. And we found ourselves like saying that at every age and every stage. And now, with a 13-year-old, it's like his intellectual curiosity, and he wants to know about politics. He wants to know about government. Like we watched Hamilton, and our family is obsessed with Hamilton. By the way, have you seen it?
I saw it live in Des Moines. I didn't see it on Broadway, but I saw it when it came to Des Moines.
Watch, if you've got Disney Plus,
it's awesome.
Watch it again.
Yep.
Listen to the soundtrack.
Yep.
Like I've taught him and like half of my soccer team, his buddies, about the American Revolution and the founding of this country using Hamilton. So it's like, it's a different kind of like relationship that you have with the kids as they grow up. And Chris, my 10-year-old, is the same way, because he wants to be just like Nick. And it's funny, you'll get a kick out of this. Years ago, this is right after Trump was first elected, 2016. We're going to violin lessons, of course. And we're asking Nick, who at the time would have been 9, about how much he knows. Because this was back when, all these parents were saying, my 6-year-old just told me how devastating it is that the Electoral College is such an antiquated system. We're like, no way this happened, lady. It was like one of our Facebook friends was like, saying this. We're asking the kids, we're asking Nick specifically, because Chris was just 6 years old. And we're like, okay, who's the president? Barack Obama. Who's going to be president? Donald Trump. Who's the governor? Scott Walker. And then we started asking him, and we're like, oh man, he actually does know, kind of what's going on. And we ask, what are some things that Republicans want to do? And before Nick can answer, you hear this tiny little voice from his safety seat. Build the wall.
Oh, God.
And it's Christopher, 6 years old, just smiling from ear to ear, like, that's one of the things, right? That's one of the things that Republicans want to do. Because he knew Trump liked to build things, and he liked to build things with his blocks. And in fact, we've got a great picture of him. He built this entire like Lego city that he called Trump Town, which 6 years old, just, but it was like then that, we were like, oh my God, I wish they were this age, forever. And, just saying the cute things. We got the little baby who was just born, actually. She was born in 14. So she's like 2 years old. And now it's the same thing, only it's a different type of relationship. So when you ask, what's been your favorite part, it's been just, I guess, the different seasons of their little lives and how, we have grown with them, and it's just been amazing.
Dan, I could make a joke about Trump connecting to a 9-year-old, but that's for a different podcast. I'm going to save that one. By the way, if you ever do miss the baby changing the poopy diaper phase, you come down to Des Moines, man. No. I got 3 of them that are going to be in diapers for a while.
No, absolutely not, man. I told my kids the next diaper that's going to be changed is you're going to change mine when I'm in a nursing home
right?
someday.
Exactly. They owe you by that point,
right.
Goodness. Hey, well, I want to thank you for coming on, man. I definitely appreciate it.
Of
and I do believe this is the longest conversation you've had with a Democrat in the last 4 years that's been civil. So I am glad that we got a chance.
Possible.
And by the way, from a fan perspective, I don't think you and I ever spoke when I was in Milwaukee, but I knew of you. And my wife and I, we would always listen to Rebutting a Murderer. The Making a Murderer podcast, because we're like, God, we need somebody to clarify some of this stuff. So my wife and I would sit there and we'd grab a phone after each episode and we would listen to your Rebutting a Murder podcast. So thank you for that, because that clarified to me that Avery's guilty and should not be getting out.
Yeah, no, he most definitely is guilty. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that was when you asked what life was like before my oldest son, like that was immediately before he was born, was the Avery trial.
Okay.
And I was literally in the middle of in Chilton, Wisconsin for like 8 weeks,
Beautiful
9 weeks.
Chilton, Wisconsin.
In the middle of February. So imagine what that was like. It was actually the other reporters and everybody there was just really nice. And, I'm like a 25, 26-year-old guy. So we would go to like the one bar in town and have fun.
Yes.
It was a great time.
Let people who are listening and watching this know about Forgotten History.
Forgotten History is a podcast I just started in like March. So if you don't like me politically, first of all, you're wrong. Second by
the way, I want you to send your kids to me. I'll straighten them out on a few things.
Well, I don't know. My son, we took a listener trip to New York, and of course we had to go to Trump Tower, and he very proudly bought a Make America Great Again hat because he had to show all his friends. He got a genuine one, he said, from Trump Tower.
From China.
We all did, right, from China. So we all did, it's actually hilarious. We all did going down the escalator waving like he did. Forgotten History is a podcast I just started a few months ago. It's 5-minute stories of American history that you might not know. For example, the woman who very nearly started the Revolutionary War, the shot heard around the world might not have actually been fired at Lexington. It might have been fired somewhere else. Let's see, what's another one? The sailors.
I thought that was Bobby Thompson in the World Series. My bad.
No, there was the sailors who sunk their own ships to stop the British from seizing Baltimore Harbor. A little song you might have heard called The Star-Spangled Banner was written that night after they did it. We had a guy who waged an entire presidential campaign from prison. We had The Singing Savior, the story of the guy who sang, as he's credited with rescuing 2,700 people on 9/11, singing America the Beautiful and old Irish hymns the entire way. And that's how people knew to follow him, even as the smoke got so thick. So it's stories like that 5 minutes or less. It's called Forgotten History with Dan O'Donnell. And I think it's available everywhere you get podcasts. The iHeart people are really weird about having iHeart podcasts only available on iHeartRadio. So I got like a special dispensation to have it on Apple Podcasts. I'm not sure if it's up yet.
Just follow him on Twitter at Dan O'Donnell Show.
Yeah.
Dan, thank you so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we could catch up, and I'm glad you could share your story. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, absolutely, my friend. I'd love to come back anytime.
How cool was that? Thanks to Dan O'Donnell, and shout out to a friend of ours by the name of Dan Richards. And Dan was the one who said, hey, why don't you show the world, you being a liberal, and Dan is obviously quite conservative, why don't you guys show the world that you can put aside your political differences in this very divisive time, and you guys can have a conversation. And that was great. Like, it's so cool to talk with a dad like that, who has gone through it, a 6, a 10, and a 13-year-old. And congrats to Dan, and good luck to he and his wife and everybody. It was so fun to have him on. So, again, thanks to Dan O'Donnell for joining me. Not a ton of time here to tell you about something that has happened that's really, really cool. I will do more of these. It's just, as you can imagine, being a stay-at-home dad with 3 babies, my time is very short. There's need for sanity. There's need to spend time with my wife. So I have not been doing these as much as I would have liked to have been doing these. But today, here on November the 18th in the year 2020, something really, really cool just happened. We've been flirting with it. We've been waiting for it to happen, but my middle child, our twin boy, he crawled today for the very first time. And I think I've kind of tried to, on the podcast, when I've hit different marks, I think, with different points of, hey, this baby did this baby did that, to try to tell you my feelings about it. I remember when the first one crawled about a year ago, and she was about 10 months. And I don't know norms of when kids are supposed to do stuff, and you know how when they're supposed to be at this age when they do I don't know any of that. And then the second one that crawled was my youngest, twin girl. Now, she's the youngest by 2 minutes, but she crawled at like 6 months. She crawled real early, well before her older sister. And then there was the boy. Now, the boy, if you've heard me talk about it on the podcast before, Miles, he has he was born a little bit crooked, and we went to go see a spine specialist in Iowa City, the best in the state. And the good news is the specialist said, well, I don't think I'm ever going to see you again, because he thought that we had been going to physical therapy and the stretches and the bending we had been doing was going to be enough, and just the baby would develop and the spine would eventually get straight. He also wears a helmet because one side of his head is flat from being pushed around by his big sister, while in utero, forced his head to turn one way. And, you know, in today's age, its back is best. And so if he's always laying on one side, that side's going to get flat, and that's kind of what happened. So he's had the spine thing and the helmet thing, and he was born smaller, much smaller than his sister. He has since caught up to her, by the way. At their 9-month checkup, he has passed her in weight, which is awesome. But we were always waiting a little bit for him to be able to crawl. And all of a sudden, about a week and a half ago, he started army crawling. And then we're like, okay. And then I walked into his nursery the other day, about 2 days later, and there he was, popped up on all fours. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be it. So I had to drop his crib, because who knows what's next, how quickly that's going to develop, how quickly he's going to become a crawler. And then lo and behold, today I called it. Like, he's been doing the elbow army crawl, getting up on his knees. I called it today. I finally have, and I'm very proud to say this, I'm finally proud to say that I have 3 mobile babies. Of course, the oldest is running around and climbing on everything. The youngest, our baby girl, Miller, she is walking on all fours, pulling herself up. We practice walking. She's not there yet, but I've been saying she's going to walk by Thanksgiving. That's a week from now. Maybe it turns out that she walks by Christmas. But now I have 3 mobile babies. And it's funny, I was talking with Dan, about you don't ever want them to get older than this. You don't ever want them. I remember when all of the babies, when the twins were out of newborn stuff, And I was like, oh, because we're done having children. And we said, oh, man, he's out. He was the last one. And then our kids are never going to wear newborn stuff again. And then they're never going to wear 3-month stuff again and 6-month stuff again. And there was a moment when I picked up my son about 3 weeks ago. And I looked at him and I had that moment that you have with your son or your daughter. And I think it's special with fathers and sons, just as it is with fathers and daughters or mothers and daughters. But I think there's something about holding your son if you're a dad. And I picked him up and I'm holding him and I looked at him and I said, there will be a time when I can't do this because he has gotten so big so fast. And he just seems to weigh a lot for being 10 months. And, not to take this down a different path, but one thing that has also really bothered me about this whole thing, this COVID pandemic that we are under right now, and I know that there are some people who are going to say, don't live in fear and whatnot, and I'm not living in fear. I'm believing in science, and something that really bothers me is that my family that lives in Michigan, and I live in Iowa, my family that lives in Michigan does not have the opportunity to see my son and my daughters. My mother came, and look, they live in Michigan, and Governor Whitmer is doing her thing, and we live in Iowa, and Governor Reynolds is doing completely the opposite. But regardless, COVID is, many people are living, in a different time, doing different things. And frankly, it sucks. Like, it really, when I was holding my son, it really bothered me when my parents said, we're not coming for Thanksgiving because they were going to make the special trip. And I'm not mad at my parents. I'm not mad at my mother. I'm not mad at my father. I'm not mad at my sister. I'm mad at the situation. And I think there are a lot of people that if you're a parent and you're a dad or you're a mom, that your grandparents or your parents can't see their grandkids. My mom came 2 weeks after the twins were born in January of this year. My dad came the week after that for our oldest's first birthday, and then he got to meet the twins as well. In a non-COVID year, they would have been here 3 or 4 times, in the spring and the summer, and they would be here next week for Thanksgiving. And who knows about Christmas? And then everybody has a birthday in the month of January. The twins, the oldest, plus my wife and our aunt. And it's like we got a lot going on. And it just sucks. It just really, really sucks because I even called my mom that day, and I said, Mom, is there any chance you can reconsider? Because they were going to come, and my nephews who are 13 and 8, my nephews, I think, are back to all virtual school, and at the time they were going to and from and doing hybrid, and it's just such a cluster, what. And my sister works at a school, so she's going to and from, and the threat of anybody catching it, and my mother-in-law is in her 70s, my father is in his 70s, my mom is in her 70s. It just sucks. And I don't get the chance to talk about it too much, and my wife and I have both talked a lot about it, but I want my sister to meet her nephew or niece and nephew. I want my parents to see their grandkids because I don't know when COVID's going to end. I don't know when it's going to be, safe to travel from Iowa to Michigan. I don't know any of that stuff, and it just hurts. It really burns me up that I'm going through all of this with my wife. We are watching these kids grow, and from my family's perspective, they can't be a part of it. We're lucky that our situation took us to Iowa, to Des Moines, where her mother lives and her sister lives, and there's family around us. It's her family. And we needed to be near family. This was the plan before the COVID pandemic broke out. And fortunately, they're staying very insulated and quarantined, and so are we. And it really burns. And I know that you probably, if you're listening to this and you're going through it with Christmas and Thanksgiving coming up and New Year's and birthdays and everything, and, the whole summer was a waste. I feel for you. I do. And hopefully everyone is safe through the end of 2020 so we don't have to go through this again in 2021. I I don't like it. I do not like it. But again, I now have 3 mobile babies. As a stay-at-home father, I'll give you a report of that on the next episode of this podcast. So thanks again to Dan O'Donnell. Thanks to you for listening. Please review, rate, subscribe the podcast. The more you review it and rate it, the better I can grow it. And that is the goal of this podcast. So thanks for checking out this episode of Check Out My Dad Pod with me, Mike Wickett. Until next time, as always, hashtag family first. Thanks for listening to Check Out My Dad Pod. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and wherever you find yours. Thanks to the band from Silverman Sound Studios. And if you have any feedback, feel free to find us on Facebook. Search Mike Wickett Podcasts, or you can send me an email, mikewickettpodcasts@gmail.com.